So I have a confession to make, and this video has been coming for a while now. I am a Pokemaniac. For those of you who don't know, Pokemon began to invade the Western world around 1997, really picked up steam around 1998. So when I was a kid, Pokemon was just starting, and then of course it's exploded into the fandom we know it as today. Why am I saying this? Well, because there's a big video game coming out pretty soon for Nintendo Switch and Switch 2, known as Pokemon Legends ZA, and I am super excited about it. I cannot say that enough. I actually got Pokemon Legends Arceus a couple years ago, and Arceus was a ton of fun. I want to spend just a few minutes in this video talking about it, and then I want to talk about ZA and some of the big things that I'm anticipating as far as what the game is, what's going to happen. Then of course, we got to talk about some of the leaks and some of the megas and some of the new really exciting things coming out. So with Pokemon Legends Arceus, as some of you may know, it completely changed the game as far as Pokemon gameplay goes. Now, Pokemon on the original Game Boy was a ton of fun. You had red, you had green in Japan, you had blue, and then you had yellow, which were the very first generation of Pokemon games. These were on the Game Boy. They're two-dimensional. You could trade for the first time, which was really cool. And of course, it kind of set the groundwork as to what Pokemon is today. It had some really primitive gameplay and graphics as far as what we might anticipate on the new ones, but at the same time, they were a lot of fun, and they were the best we had at the time. Now, fast forward to Pokemon Legends Arceus, and a lot of the things I remember talking about as a kid are now present on the Nintendo Switch. So you had things like, hey, what if I could just run around and stalk a Pokemon, like in the grass? Well, guess what? In Arceus, some designer and Game Freak finally said, hey, you know what? We can do this. And Nintendo decided this was a good idea. And then guess what? You now had a character in three-dimensional landscape who could crouch down and throw a Pokemon at unsuspecting Pokemon, right? Pokeball. There we go. And with that, you could basically go ahead and start a battle. You could catch a Pokemon. You could do a number of different things in Arceus that you could not before, which was really exciting. And then Arceus was actually a much better game, in my opinion, than it had to be. I know some people were expecting this gigantic, full-fledged world, 100% three-dimensional, open world, Legend of Zelda style game, right? But we didn't quite get that, at least not with Arceus in the first pass. What we did get, though, is we got a really cool game with new mechanics and 5 landscapes where you could basically go around and catch different Pokemon. It felt cool. The traveling was increased as you continued throughout the game and you unlocked more Pokemon. And then by the end of it, of course, they had some really cool secret challenges. So if you do not know at the very end of the game, you can now confront some really big Pokemon like Dialga, Palkia, Giratina, just to name 3. And then, of course, if you keep on going and complete the Pokédex, well, you can actually finally confront Arceus, which is a surprisingly tough boss fight, but a really good one at the same time. For these reasons, I think Arceus was actually a pretty great game, and I think it's slightly underrated as far as the entire Pokemon world goes, especially since it was then quickly overshadowed by Scarlet and Violet. No surprise there. Now, where does that lead us? Well, nowadays, at the end of 2025, here in about 2 months or so, we're going to be having Pokemon Legends ZA. And ZA, of course, is what I think a lot of the fans are hoping that Pokemon Legends Arceus would have been. So ZA, for those of you who don't already know or maybe haven't already seen the spoilers, is set in Luminos City, which is basically the backdrop of Generation 6, or the region known as Kalos, which is kind of inspired by France, for those of you who didn't know. Gen 6 was a weird generation because it was an incredibly small Pokédex, which I think a lot of people were kind of taken aback by. They weren't really ready for it as far as, oh, we don't get that many Pokemon this time around. I think there was about 70-something total, which was pretty short, especially in comparison to the generations where you got, over 150. And as a result of that, I think a lot of people thought of it as kind of a letdown at first. It was also on the 3DS at the time, which wasn't exactly full-on Switch gameplay that we know today. I digress. Pokemon in the Kalos region were really cool because they were marked in Gen 6 by a new mechanic. This was something cool we weren't even ready for, nor did we really understand at the time, and that was Mega Evolution. When Mega Evolution was presented, I think a lot of people at first thought it was kind of a gimmick. They thought it was, oh, here we go, we're going to take some existing Pokemon and give them Mega Forms, which is basically like a 3rd evolution or a 4th form, if you will, turning them into a pseudo-legendary Pokemon of their own, and basically by giving them legendary stats and cool new ability for the most part, and then also a cool new style. So for example, as we all know, Mega Charizard, it's one of 2 that got an X and a Y form, just like Pokemon X and Y, Gen 6. And then Mega Mewtwo is the other one, it got an X and Y form. And because of that, the really popular ones then were seen to be either different types, different secret moves, and then of course they got different stylings too. Now Mega Forms took a minute, but then they really started to catch on fire, and everybody started to love them, and we started to see some really cool things. Like for example, I know when I was a kid on the playground, we'd talk about, hey, do you know that Mega Charizard, as we now call it, has a secret form? And of course this was back in the 90s. And everybody was like, oh, no way. And then, of course, they said the same thing about Blastoise and Venusaur because those were the first starters. There were some fun names thrown out there, like Rainer for Blastoise's god form or legendary form. And then you also had Venusaurus, and then you also had Charlord, which is supposed to be like the Mega Charizard. It's now more like a Mega Charizard Y. And then, of course, Mega Venusaur and Mega Blastoise came around. Very cool. In a sense, it was kind of affirming these childhood ambitions and the rumors that kids would make up on the playground, right? And then from there, we got the remakes of Gen 3. We got Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. These were really cool because they also introduced primal forms. So now you had Primal Groudon, Primal Kyogre, and Mega Rayquaza became a thing too, and frankly menaced the competitive Pokemon scene for quite a while. These were excellent because, of course, these are even more Pokemon that everybody was hoping for, and now here they are for us to play as. Finally, 20-something years of payoff in the making, right? Really cool stuff. Anyways, I digress once again, because now we're getting an even more of a swath of Mega Evolutions that nobody was really ready for. We're seeing here that not only were those Pokemon, I think there were 13 more Mega Evolutions introduced after that, and they gave us a total of around 30, and now we're getting another like 27, I want to say, taking our total to somewhere close to 60 Mega Evolutions, which is absolutely insane, because these are like the ones that are supposed to take your favorite Pokemon and turn them basically into legendaries, right? And I'm so happy to see that as we went through Gen 7 and Gen 8 and Gen 9, each one had different ways of doing it, right? They had different claims to fame. Like for example, in Gen 7, it was all about the Z move in the Alola region. And then in Gen 8, well, they wanted to go with the Gigantamax battles, right? And Galar. And then finally in Gen 9, we finally had Terastallization, which is supposed to be the really big one in Paldea. They basically turned your Pokemon into a third type or a different type, right? And out of those, I'd say that Terastallization is actually the best one, or maybe that's just in my own personal headcanon because it's the most recent in the Scarlet and Violet, but at least it had a lot of competitive merit, right? Because when you get into a battle with Terastallization, well, you could quickly change the type of your favorite Pokemon, and then suddenly it wouldn't be super effective to damage, right? Or maybe you could finally take down a meta-relevant Pokemon of theirs. So that was pretty cool, and I gotta say it worked out for the most part. However, I think Z-moves, Gigantamax, Terastallization, you name it, don't hold a candle to Mega Evolutions, because Megas were kind of the best of both worlds, and I think people, now they were about 10, 12 years later, have come to realize that, yeah, it's true. Because with Megas, well, you only got one per team, so of course you had to choose wisely, but not only did a lot of Megas change the typing, but they also changed the ability too. And plus, they look cooler. Let's be real. A lot of the Mega designs are pretty cool. Not saying all of them. I know a couple of them were letdowns, to say the least. But I think a lot of Megas definitely scratched the itch. Now, we're seeing here with the Megas that not only could you do it in the beginning of the turn, but then you could also attack or you could swap. And you could really make your decisions as far as Mega, make your move, and then from there really just trying to change the course of a battle for the better. There were really no drawback to Mega evolving your Pokemon, which is awesome. And now, with like Pokemon Legends ZA, I think we're going to see the next step of that. So like I said, we got about 20-something more Megas coming out here, at least according to the rumored leaked list. And a lot of these Megas are weird Pokemon we weren't expecting. A lot of Gen 5s on there. And I really wasn't know what to think of it at first until I started thinking about it a little bit more. And I realized, hey, Victory Bell, for example, is getting a Mega. I used to love Victory Bell. He was one of those weird grass poison types he didn't really know what to do with in the first games, and now here he is getting a really cool new Mega Evolution, probably a new special ability of some sort, and then of course Victory Bell for, I don't know, might be meta next year, which is going to be really cool. The bigger thing though, and we're going to see here on some of the ZA leaked footage and gameplay from the early on, is that the Megas can even not only transform in the open world, but then they can follow you around, which is incredible. This is like Pokemon, almost like role-playing games, like we really wanted from the original Game Boy games, right? Here we are, relatively open world. You can go ahead and just, once again, Arceus-style gameplay. You can choose to start a battle, you can choose to run away, and of course you can choose to just spike a Pokeball and see if you can catch somebody from the wild, right? And it's absolutely incredible to see that as far as having your helper Pokemon now Mega, and then of course new Megas. And I think the whole thing just opened up to almost like a Battle Frontier style gameplay. For those of you who remember Gen 3, that was Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald. Emerald had the Battle Frontier and everybody loved it. Now it looks like it might be coming back here in this form in Lumia City, which is really, really cool. I think I can speak on behalf of just about everybody when I say this is something everybody liked. This is something everybody wanted to see, right? So, Pokemon Legends ZA, what else can we expect? Well, I'm hoping, because this is probably the biggest letdown of Pokemon Legends Arceus, was the storyline. Really, what was Arceus? It was 5 big sandboxes, and as you unlocked more Pokemon, you got to traverse through the different regions. And then, of course, as you traversed more effectively and faster, you could basically catch more exciting, more alpha, more, because they're big alpha Pokemon, and of course, stronger Pokemon along the way, too. And then by the end of it, of course, when you do finally catch Arceus, well, you have a pretty stacked team of insanely powerful Pokemon. In this game, however, it seems like that's basically the same idea, except there's actual storyline behind it involving everybody's often forgotten yet kind of favorite Pokemon, Zygarde. So another bit of history here, if you don't remember 2013 very well, and the introduction of Generation 6, well, Pokemon X and Y came out with kind of a thud. So Pokemon had a big Gen 5 push. That was Unova, and that was on the DS. And with Unova, everybody was really hoping for the gray version, right? So it was going to be Pokemon Black and White, and then they're hoping for like the Platinum of the bunch, or the Emerald of the bunch, which was going to be like the gray version for Kyurem, right? And that never happened. Instead, we got Black and White 2. And Black and White 2 are often considered to be some of the best games in the entire franchise. So hey, maybe it was better that Black and White just got sequels instead. I don't know, possibly. But then, when X and Y came out, everybody said to themselves, well, hang on, X and Y has to get a third game now, right? So everybody, of course, thought, well, X and Y for the Mega Evolutions, but what about Z? Pokemon Z. That was going to be the big third game, right? And in some ways, it feels like this was always in the back pocket, right? And they were going to release a Pokemon Z, and now finally here it is, 10 years later, 12 years later, actually, on the Switch and Switch 2, which is kind of like a brand new launch title for the Switch 2. And it's absolutely crazy to see because now we're seeing the gameplay of Arceus plus the rumored idea of Pokemon Z now finally happening here in Legends ZA. Do I hate it? No, I actually don't. I think it's rather weird and unsuspected though, but at the same time, it's cool. And I'm happy we're finally at least getting a successor of sorts to these old-fashioned games. Now, what's the actual legend going to be? What's the actual storyline going to be? So Arceus, mild spoiler alert here if y'all haven't played it yet. I know it's kind of an old game at this point, but basically, long story short here is that there are some characters who are up to no good. They caused some temporal manipulation using the other legendary Pokemon, and then as you're able to basically beat these characters and traverse around the regions, you finally have the ability to meet Arceus and catch him, and then the whole story, right? Arceus is a really, really simple storyline. It's, okay, you go here, you catch these Pokemon, you battle these people, the end. And that's pretty much Arceus in a nutshell, even though you are transported back in time and it's in a weird, kind of like a prehistoric, ancient version of Gen 4. Anyways, with this though, it's going to instead be in Lumia City. We know it's going to be almost like a futuristic successor of sorts to the X and Y games. And we know a lot of it revolves around Zygarde and how Zygarde is basically, I'm going to go ahead and say it's 99.9% confirmed that Mega Zygarde is going to be the key of the gameplay, right? And the key of the ultimate storyline. And it seems to me like we're going to get a lot of this Battle Frontier. There's probably going to be some insidious Team Rocket-esque group. And then finally, once they're defeated, Mega Zygarde's going to do something, and then you're going to save the day. I'm going to go ahead and say I got most of the plot there without actually having played the game. So Mega Zygarde, it sounds cool. Don't know what he looks like yet, but I think we could speculate a little bit here. Now, the rest of the Megas are insanely cool. Now, I'm happy that we're finally not just getting, Charizard Z or Mewtwo Z, or we're getting the obvious ones, basically. Like, I hate to say it, everybody asked for Mega Flygon. It doesn't look like we're getting Mega Flygon this time. So that's another one that was a fan favorite, and it kind of subverted expectations a little bit. Now, let's take a minute and talk about the first actually revealed one that's not just a list off the internet, and that is going to be Mega Dragonite. Now, Mega Dragonite is interesting because we've already got the other pseudos, right? So we got Mega Tyranitar. That was actually one of the first ones. He's pretty cool. We got Mega Metagross. Very, very cool. Everybody loves Metagross. He's this big, computer-esque steel Pokemon, right? And then, of course, we also got Mega Salamence, too. I think that was in Mega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. And, of course, Mega Salamence was another one that everybody was asking for, and he turned out pretty good for the most part. We also have Mega Garchomp, another fan favorite, even though I think it's absolutely criminal they traded the speed stack in for an attack, but oh well, what are you going to do about it? And then, of course, continuing with the pseudo lines, when we get to Gen 5, of course, things start to get a little bit rockier, right? Because Hydreigon, which is the Dark Dragon of Gen 5, does not have a Mega yet. He is one of the other ones that everybody was suspecting, kind of like Flygon, and that did not happen. And then with Goodra, who's a pseudo-legendary of Gen 6, if you didn't already know that, the original X and Y, Goodra is an often forgotten kind of rainy dragon, right? And Goodra did get a special form in Arceus, actually. It got a Steel Dragon type, which is really cool. I definitely prefer Hisuian Goodra over the normal version, but there you go. No Mega, though. So no actual Mega, just a divergent Hisuian version of him at this point, right? And then, of course, Gen 7 rolls around. It was Kommo-o, the fighting dragon there in Alola. Gen 8 rolls around. That was going to be Dragapult. The Ghost Dragon is pretty cool. And you also had Gen 9, who's the new one's Baxcalibur, who's an Ice Dragon. He's also kind of Godzilla-like, kind of cool. So everybody basically from Gen 5 onward, those pseudo-legendaries, right, they don't really have much of a difference with the exception of Goodra, who got an alternate divergent evolution through Hisuian Goodra, right? And then, of course, you had the Z moves, which kind of landed with a thud, right? And then, of course, Gigantamax, which, just okay. And then finally, Terrestrialization didn't really do a whole lot outside of competitive gameplay. So the interesting thing here is that they kind of went back to the beginning. They said, well, Mega Dragonite, of course, is the only pseudo-legendary who doesn't have a Mega yet, at least of the original pseudo-legendaries going through Gen 4. And they went ahead and gave Mega Dragonite a Flying Dragon Mega Evolution, right? Pictures here. Basically, he has some Dragonair orbs on him and two massive, almost angel wings sprouting from his head instead of on his back. It's almost like two little Dragonite wings on the back and two massive angel wings on the head instead. Now, Mega Dragonite, if you didn't already see it online, is a very controversial pick. And this is another one of those types where I think most Mega Evolutions are really, really cool. And of course, there are a couple that really fell short. Personally, I'm 50-50 on Mega Dragonite. I think he's kind of cool in some ways. I'm happy we're finally getting a Mega Dragonite. And I think the really telltale sign, aside from like the Dragon Air things going on, like the Dragon Air wings on the head and of course the orbs on him, which makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. I think the big thing with Mega Dragonite is going to ultimately be the ability. So if Mega Dragonite is something really cool, like let's say Inner Focus or maybe Aerialate to give some really special power-ups for the flying types, then Mega Dragonite can be an absolute menace. And regardless of what you think about the designs at that point, it'll be an absolutely mega evolution at that point where everybody's going to lose their minds and of course use Mega Dragonite competitively. So there's one thought for you right there. A few other ones I just want to name really, really quick. I'm going to have a cool picture of the link up here, and of course we're going to have some of the rumored Mega Evolutions coming out, is Mega Binnacle. Like, for example, whoever thought about these weird Gen 5 Pokemon getting Mega Evolutions, right? Like, I gotta say, Electrike, for example, was really cool. That was the Gen 3 one. I think it was a Mega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. So that was really cool when some of those often neglected Pokemon got Megas. And now we're seeing that happen again here with some of these ones, right? And another one's Scrafty. Scrafty having basically a fully molted Scrafty as a Mega Evolution, right? Sounds really cool, at least from the leak. Another one I just want to mention really quick is Phalanx. So the rumor with Phalanx is that it's going to almost have like a Voltron form where the Phalanx basically form into a giant robot. And that's amazing. So, for example, once again, you can say whatever you want about some of these more inspired Mega Evolutions, let's say, like Dragonite, for example. But when you get some really cool ones like Phalanx and some of the other ones that aren't quite as controversial, I think the Megas really start to speak for themselves. Mega Victory Bell is another one that, once again, sounds like the jury's kind of out on right now. It sounds, at least from what the leak was, kind of ridiculous. But if we actually see Mega Victory Bell and learn about why it is a Mega and basically what's happened to it and the ability, then Mega Victory Bell, once again, could be incredibly cool. We just don't know yet. There's still a lot of question marks here. Now, another big thing I want to touch on really quick here is going to be the new starters. So really quick, in Pokemon Legends ZA, the starter Pokemon were a little bit weird. So for example, you had Oshawott, who went to Samurott, of course. It was Hisuian Samurott, which was a water dark type. Then you also had Rowlet, who went into a very, very bizarre version of Decidueye, which was then was fighting and flying, or no, fighting and grass. There we go. So it was 4 times weak to flying, and that was the problem with Hisuian Decidueye. And in a lot of people's opinions, right, that was a big step back from the grass ghost, which is normal Decidueye. And then finally, of course, we also had the Hisuian Typhlosion, which came from Cyndaquil. Hisuian Typhlosion, in my opinion, was probably one of the better ones, if not the best one. That, of course, is a fire ghost type, very similar to Skeledirge, which we got right afterwards. Now, they're doing something very similar to that in Pokemon Legends ZA, where we're now basically getting a series of Pokemon that were either neglected or forgotten about when they made Pokemon Legends Arceus. So now we're getting Totodile, which we can only speculate as far as what exactly this new evolution of Feraligatr is going to be like, right? But from what people are saying, it's going to be a water dragon type in a mega evolution form. So in some ways, I'm kind of thinking here that it's going to be normal Feraligatr, just with the new mega, which is going to be changing it to water dragon type, maybe with the new special ability. That'll be really cool. I'm excited to see Totodile there. Another one's Chikorita. Chikorita, of course, is going to be Meganium, and Mega Meganium sounds very, very cool too. And let's be real, Meganium's always been one of the slept-on starters, so getting a really cool new Mega form, which might be a fairy grass type, which is the rumor, is incredible. Meganium is something everybody needs more of, and finally seeing it get the fairy typing and maybe some cool redesign instead of just being a big green Brontosaurus type creature dinosaur is really, really cool. So I'm also excited to see Chikorita back. Now, the weird one is Tepig. And Tepig is weird to me because it's like a Gen 5er that's now in a not Gen 2, which is going to be Totodile and Chikorita. But of course, we have to remember really quick that Cyndaquil was already featured in Pokemon Legends Arceus and already got Hisuian Typhlosion, right? So it only makes sense then that they already used Oshawott too. So then the only remaining ones at that point would have been Snivy and Tepig to choose from. Now, really quick here, saying Snivy is probably ruled out because they already had to use Chikorita. And then, of course, you had Tepig as the last man standing, right? And Tepig, it sounds to me like Emboar is going to be getting another Mega Evolution, or at least a Mega Evolution from here. And it's going to be another fighting fire type, which is kind of a lame one. Everybody knows that we're done with fighting fire. It was cool when it was Mega Blaziken, right? And then, of course, it was Infernape, who was one of the only fightings in Gen 4, fire fightings in Gen 4 like that. So everybody chose Infernape when they went through Diamond and Pearl. And then, of course, after that, you also had in Gen 5 Tepig, who was also firefighting. And then everything started to slow down just a little bit with Kalos in the original X and Y, because at least Delphox broke that trend a little bit because it was Fire Psychic, which was a nice change of pace. Now, speaking of Gen 6, let's talk about them really quick, because we're also getting the Mega Evolutions for the Gen 6 starters. So paying homage, ZA is going to more or less be the third game of the X and Ys, right? So homage to X and Y would be the Gen 6 starters, right? So now we have Chespin and a Chestnut. We, of course, have Froakie into oh my gosh, it's one of the best Pokemon ever, which everybody should be a little bit more excited about, but Greninja, of course. And then finally, we're going to be the Delphox from the Fennekin. There we go. And the weird thing here, of course, is that their Megas don't seem to be changing the game too much. So it looks like Mega Chestnut in this case is going to be Grass Fighting once again. I'm kind of hoping this changes a little bit, though. Maybe Grass Steel. That was briefly rumored. Maybe Chestnut has like Steel Shields almost, just shows defensive tankiness. I think Mega Chestnut has some real potential there, but we will see as it's revealed. Maybe it gets a little cape too, almost like I'm once again thinking a tank in a video game, right? And then, of course, Mega Greninja sounds like it's just basically a bigger Greninja hanging off of a massive water shuriken, which is really cool. Mega Greninja, I'm super, super psyched about, if you didn't already tell. Water Dark type, more than likely. And then finally, we have the Mega Delphox, which sounds like it's actually riding the broom, if not multiple brooms, according to one leak. And, of course, Fire Psychic makes a lot of sense for Delphox. So just a few more examples, right, of inspired decisions for potential Mega Evolutions. Now, I think we have to take every bit of leaker with a grain of salt as far as what the ZA Megas look like. But at the same time, though, I'm psyched. And I think everybody else can speak for themselves because it's really exciting to have new Megas, and of course, new Megas that we've been waiting for over 12 years at this point. So Gen 3 starters, or Gen 2 starters, excuse me, Gen 5 with the Tepig, right? And then, of course, the Gen 6 starters are getting Megas. We can only sit back and wonder what comes next, right? Is it going to be another Legends ZA game? Maybe Gen 10 revives the Mega Evolutions even more so, right? Because, of course, there's many others we did not touch on this list. For example, Mega Drampa. Who saw Mega Drampa coming? And it sounds like he's almost like a clouded Viking type, like a Viking boat almost, right? Mega Drampa. Really cool, potentially. Once again, that's another one of those Megas that could come out of left field and just surprise us all as being incredibly cool, right? And there's a whole slew of other Megas and random Gen 5 Pokemon that finally got their Megas, and it's really cool to see. Now, Gen 10, really quick, has been rumored to take place in the Greek Isles. That's at least what one of the early leaks said. And with that in mind, I think there's a lot of potential as far as what the new Gen 10 Pokemon could be. There's probably going to be at least 100 of them, right? And then from there, if they have new Megas, or at least the reintroduction of Megas like we're seeing here in ZA, so that would be an incredibly cool idea. But the better part of me knows, especially like what we saw at Gen 9 and Terastallization, is that more than likely Gen 10 is going to get a different gimmick or different way of battling, right? So maybe they change types again. Maybe they have some secret ability, right? Like the Z moves ×2. I don't know yet. Gen 10 will do something different, but part of me hopes that we see more Megas in the future. Maybe it's gonna be the next Legends game to have another 20-something Megas. That'd be cool. I think I could live with that. So, and like we saw the trend here, right? It would be Pokemon Legends Arceus was the first one. Now Legends ZA is the spiritual successor, of course, to Gen 6. And now, of course, the next one might be successor to Gen 7, right? Or even Gen 8. So we might see a Sun, Moon, and Star Pokemon Legends Star, like a Necrozma type game. That would be cool. Or we could see a Gen 8, right? Which would be Sword, Shield, and Spear. Who knows what the third armament would be of a Sword and Shield type Gen 8. And then, of course, from there, that would be more around Eternatus, which is definitely a big Pokemon that could have a Legends version of it, right? So I think Eternatus is by far the biggest Pokemon of them all. So with this in mind, I think the Legends games have a ton of potential, right? So not only did we talk about Arceus just changing the gameplay, right? Being the games that we all wanted in the 90s, right? These were the games we sat on the playground while we played on our original Game Boys, keep in mind. And we talked about, hey, what if we had this game, right? What if it was something really exciting where you could literally go up in the grass, throw Pokeballs, throw your Pokemon at other Pokemon, and then start these battles, right? And voila, Legends Arceus delivered it. And we finally got the gameplay. Maybe there's a weak storyline, sure, but it was a lot of fun. Now ZA, if we can get that same refined gameplay, right, which it seems like we do in these trailers, with Mega Evolutions following us around and having an actual storyline, this game could maybe be the best Pokemon game ever made. I'm going to go ahead and say that's why I'm making this video right now, because I am super psyched for this. And then, of course, if we do get a Pokemon Legends Star, like around Necrozma or something similar, then that would be even crazier, right? It'd be once again the third version of the game that we didn't get yet. And then finally we get even more Mega Evolutions on top of that, and it would basically just mean that the Legends games are the new Mega Evolution games, and they're the games everybody wants to play because they're super fun and their Pokemon is at least as close as we can currently get to in the real world. All right, everybody, let me know what you think about this. If you couldn't tell, I'm excited. Let me know what you think. Let me know about Pokemon Legends ZA. What are you most excited for? I know for me, it's the gameplay, definitely, but I'd love to hear your all's takes. What do you think are going to be the best Mega Evolutions? Do you think there's going to be any really, really great ones, maybe some surprisingly great ones that we haven't talked about yet? Once again, let me know in the chat. I'll see you all next time. Peace out.